You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with journalist and author Rachel Shabby and director of the Onward think tank, Sebastian Payne. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, GPs scrap services to cope with strikes is on the front of the Telegraph, as routine appointments are suspended for up to a week to help deal with the junior doctors' walkout. The Eye also calls attention to the upcoming strike disruption. The headline, pharmacists drafted in to offset hospital strike chaos. And the Mirror, which leads with the headline, hospital trek scandal, as 1 in 3 999 patients have had to make their own way to hospital. Meanwhile, the Mail refers to the latest Labour posters with this quote by leader Sir Keir Starmer as he stands by every word made by his party. Similarly, The Times says Labour will blame the Prime Minister for crashing the economy and continue to launch more provocative ads. Whilst the Daily Express writes about the bank's betrayal of loyal customers, as findings suggest millions of customers prefer face-to-face banking rather than online. And the Daily Star speculates what kind of life could be found on Jupiter. Interesting. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Rachel Shabby and Sebastian Payne. Welcome to you both. Let us start with the Telegraph and their front page. GPs struggle due to the strike. Services they're going to struggle with services and serving the public because of the reduced numbers. Take us into this story, first of all, Rachel.
Sure. So this is being reported by the Telegraph and, of course, other papers as well. There is a junior doctor strike set to begin on Tuesday, lasting for 4 days, and it's thought that up to 47,000 junior doctors will be on strike during that period. So obviously that's a lot of staff that aren't going to be around. And so both the unions and the government actually are warning people of what to expect over the coming days. But it is worth pointing out, and I think someone from the BMA Junior Doctors Association did say this earlier on Sky, that patients are already facing these sort of the crisis in the health service. They're already having services impacted. They're already facing delays, whether it's for surgery or for cancer care or for routine appointments. Those delays are a product of under-resourcing, short staffing, shortage of beds, lack of social care, lack of community care. And that's exactly why junior doctors are going out on strike. It's partly about those conditions that are simply unsustainable. So I think the government will find that despite all the disadvantages and the lack of availability of services this week, there is still very strong public support for doctors and support for what they're striking over.
And according to this article, Sebastian, it seems that the impact of the strike is going to be far wider than perhaps initially anticipated.
That's right. The Telegraph reports that 375,000 appointments are expected to be cancelled, which is well up on the 175,000 predicted for this strike. And Dr. Stephen Powis, who's, I think, the medical director of NHS England, has said, look, this is piling pressure on the health service where it's already dealing with the long backlogs due to COVID. And, of course, this is not the first strike we've had.
For 8.
Oh, hello?
Sebastian.
Oh.
Go ahead, Sebastian. Sorry, we had a problem with the sound there.
Oh, no worries. I was just saying, I don't know if you caught any of that, but it's going to be 375,000 appointments that are likely to be cancelled due to the strike this week, well up on the 175,000 that was predicted before. And Dr. Stephen Powis, will remember him from all the COVID press conferences, who's medical director of NHS England. He is saying that it's going to pile huge pressure on and is urging people to try and stay away from hospitals, from GP appointments, unless it is absolutely absolutely necessary. And of course, the whole thing is devastating for a health service already struggling with the backlog from the coronavirus pandemic. And so, really, I think everyone just wants a deal to be done on this, and negotiations are still sort of going on backwards and forwards between the government and the BMA to try and come to a resolution on this. But I think that's the thing everybody wants, because this 96 hours strike is going to be the most disruptive yet. And really, no side seems to be looking to back down. The government's still trying to put forward more money, but not quite enough to help to satisfy the BMA. And the BMA is holding firm. And I know plenty of junior doctors, Maya, who feel very distressed by the situation. They're there to try and help patients, help get through the backlog. But at the same time, they feel they deserve a pay rise. So hopefully this will be the last of these strikes and we can get to some resolution. But at the moment, it doesn't look hugely positive.
Yes, I mean, unprecedented, that the length of time, I think that's the thing that will be most damaging and people are most fearful of. Staying with the health service, let's move to the Mirror, Rachel. And this story about patients, 999 patients, 1 in 3 being forced to make their own way to A&E, an accident emergency.
Yeah, it's a really distressing statistic, isn't it? I mean, we all have loved ones that, people who are elderly and perhaps vulnerable. And we think about, what would happen, God forbid, if they were to require an ambulance service and would have to wait. And we just heard, I think a few days ago in Norfolk, a man died after having a heart attack and waiting a little bit too long for an ambulance that arrived too late. So it is an incredibly frightening situation with these wait times for ambulances. It's completely unsustainable. And it is just, again, it all is part of this same picture with a health service that is chronically, critically underfunded, severe staff shortages, just unsustainable staff levels. And the staff that are working, whether that's ambulance workers or junior doctors or nurses, who, by the way, it's very unusual for these health workers to go on strike. So it speaks to how severe the situation is. But certainly the situation they're facing is of stress, burnout, extraordinarily high rates of depression, anxiety, the impact on mental health. So it just does speak to a very desperate situation all round, and one that really can only be resolved with government intervention, with resources and with funding, with giving health workers the pay that they deserve and giving all of us the healthcare that we deserve.
And it does seem truly shocking, Sebastian. The Mirror here suggesting that the poll found that those needing urgent care were driving or taking taxis, trains or even buses to get to A&E.
Indeed, it just speaks to the strain the health service is under at the moment. And I think the number one thing to alleviate the strain would be to try and solve a deal on this pay issue, because obviously there's much bigger factors at play for the health service in terms of there's the future structure of it, the pressures it's facing with social care, the ageing population. And I think obviously the strikes have really made this particularly worse. But I think during the ambulance drivers' strike, I recall the stories were pretty rife of people having to make their own way through various different ways to hospitals. So, again, this is not really surprising. And I just think the absolute premium has to be on trying to get some kind of resolution to this. And I think there's a story on the front of the Eye paper tomorrow that, again, speaks to the kind of the lengths things are going to have to go to, that pharmacists are being drafted in to try and offset the hospital chaos. And of course, that's not a situation that should ever have to happen. But unfortunately, we are where we are with this. And I think that, it's good to see people are doing their best to try and help out, but it should not be in this situation.
Yes, Rachel, as Sebastian suggests, the front of the Eye, looking to the story of pharmacists actually having to come in and roll up sleeves and get involved to help. I mean, how particularly will they be able to help cover for junior doctors?
I think that's a really good question. And I wonder how pharmacists themselves feel about that, whether they feel that that is a suitable measure to be taken, whether they feel they are qualified to do that. I mean, of course, pharmacists have an incredibly deep knowledge of medical conditions, as well as of obviously the drugs that are being dispensed. But you do have to wonder how they feel about being drafted in this way. I think there's an extraordinary amount of pressure going on within the NHS, not just looking at the pharmacists who are being asked to do this, but also consultants and doctors who are not on strike. I think some people have described it as bullying, actually, just sort of being corralled and pressured into rolling up their sleeves and diving in a way that doesn't really seem fair or sustainable for the staff that are being asked to do this. So again, it speaks to the urgency for the government to just get round a negotiating table and sort this out, offer doctors pay that is actually decent and fair. A reminder that doctors aren't actually asking for a pay rise, they're asking for pay restitution because their pay has taken such a hit over the last decade and a bit. They are just asking for a restoration so that it is at least in line with inflation. That is not a pay rise. That is just asking to stand still.
Welcome back to both of you. Let's start with the Telegraph and the headline below the picture of the Princess of Wales. Northern Ireland peace is fragile in wake of threats, says Minister. This is Chris Heaton-Harris, the Northern Ireland Minister, and this is the warning, I guess, before the anniversary tomorrow of the Northern Ireland agreement, and also before the visit of President Biden. Sebastian.
Yes, I thought I might be going my direction, that one. Yes, I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of stuff written over the weekend about the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, some very good insights into what happened then, but also the relevance to where we are now. And this article by Chris Heaton-Harris is warning that even though, obviously, the Good Friday Agreement has stood 25 years, that politics and peace in Northern Ireland are not necessarily in the best possible place because, first of all, Stormont Assembly isn't up and running, that despite the Windsor framework Rishi Sunak brought together to try and mend some of the issues with Brexit in Northern Ireland, the DUP have not gone into Stormont, so there's no government in Northern Ireland. And the second of all is still warning that there may well potentially be threats to the peace generally there. So I think it's a very good stark reminder of the fact that, although there's a lot to celebrate 25 years on from that historic accord, things could still be a lot better and need to be a lot better in Northern Ireland too.
And Rachel, do you think the presence of President Biden will go some way towards helping to restore power sharing, and also that the timing, the 25th anniversary, do you think that the timing and everything will work together to come to that conclusion?
It might do. I mean, I think President Biden visiting is obviously an important step, and I think it's also an endorsement for Sunak on an international stage and being able to renegotiate the Northern Ireland Protocol as he did. It is worth pointing out, this peace agreement, obviously, we've all been looking at it over this, historic 25-year anniversary. It is a template. If you're involved in peace studies or international relations, this is held up as a model of a successful negotiation. And so, of course, it's incredibly disturbing to hear these warnings of its fragility. But it's worth saying that we have been hearing these warnings for the last few years, particularly in regard to Brexit and the effect that that has had. We saw Peter Hain, who's a former Northern Ireland secretary, was writing in the Guardian, I think, a few days ago, and pointing out the disruptive effect of Brexit in that the idea of a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland has just reignited questions that people didn't have and haven't had for decades over citizenship, over identity, over self-determination. And so that has had a disruptive factor on, what was an incredible and historic agreement, which we are marking the anniversary of tomorrow.
Let's move to the Mirror and just fit in some news on the Coronation. More details revealed this evening. Sebastian.
Yes, and we've got details of the route, which is going to be a lot shorter than the one that was taken by Queen Elizabeth II at the last coronation. And actually on the front page of another paper, The Telegraph, they're saying that it may well be ticketed to get tickets along the route that the King will be taking on his way to the coronation at Westminster Abbey. But yes, obviously, May the 6th, less than a month away when that is going to happen. A very historic day for the country. And I think the King is taking a very good approach to this. He's not trying to reenact what happened in the 1950s, nor is he getting away with the pomp and pageantry that many people enjoy and associate with the royal family. So it strikes me as if they're getting a good balance here. They're trying to keep the best of the traditions and the historic ceremony, but they're also trying to sort of, bring it up to date and not make it too grandiose and too over the top. So yeah, they will be hearing a bit more about it. And I've also seen on Twitter tonight, there is an official coronation emoji. So if you tweet #coronation, you get a little crown that goes there. So even though the rest of Twitter is slightly falling apart under Elon Musk, it's hopefully that bit of it is still working on May the 6th.
Look forward to that emoji.